All right, I think we can get started. And people are going to continue to join as we start. So I am going to remind everybody once in a while that if they do need interpretation to go to their respective channels. But welcome everybody. We're really happy to have you all here. If you joined us for the second time, our first session was on Wednesday. And we went through a little bit of a background of what rights of nature is. We had some great presenters and we had a good discussion. So I'm gonna do a quick recap of what that was. And as we did in the last session, before we started, we just wanted to acknowledge whose land we stand on today. Well, my name is Rafael Iturralde. I am from Quito, Ecuador, but I live in the United States. Today, I join you from the ancestral land of the Lenape, and more specifically from the Canarsie, also known as Brooklyn, New York. So here, my team members are gonna put in the chat a link to a website where you can look at the native land you're standing on today. And we really encourage you to add that in the chat. Tell us where you're joining us from today. And let's just get into this mindset of grounding ourselves, of considering ourselves as a part of not only the history that we've been through, but also of nature. So I also want to remind speakers, and whenever you're going to ask a question, that we do have interpretation. So if we can try to not speak too fast, that would be super helpful for our interpreter. And Juan, you can also let me know if I'm speaking too fast. And for the last time, I'm going to remind Spanish speakers to join also the Spanish channel. Bienvenidos a todos, espero que estén muy bien, gracias por acompañarnos hoy. Antes de empezar, solo quiero que se aseguren de estar en el canal de español, abajo en la barra de abajo, donde dice interpretación, para que puedan escuchar toda la sesión en español. Y si van a dar una contribución o una pregunta en español, les recomiendo que antes de empezar a hacer la pregunta, digan, voy a hablar en español, para que nuestro intérprete sepa que tiene que traducir del otro lado. So I think we can get started here. In the last session, we talked, as I said, we gave a background of what the IUCN is, and more than that, what their commitments to rights of nature have been, which started in 2012 with Resolution 100, which considers the incorporation of the rights of nature as an organizational focal point in the IUCN decision making. And then there has been more involvement of rights of nature, but the point of us having this session here is to really try to push action towards the IUCN incorporating rights of nature principles in their decision making. And then we talked about also our current environmental law and how it has been a flawed narrative with a lot of assumptions that humans are totally separate from Mother Earth. And it's a very anthropocentric approach to dealing with nature, dealing with all of the crises that we live today in our day-to-day. And also considering that this approach to law has been flawed since forever. And you can see that with corporations having rights and nature doesn't have rights. So here, when we talk about nature, we also went through a little background of like Rights of Nature 101. And what does that mean? It does mean considering nature as a living being rather than property or a resource. So this will also have implications on the way that we speak about nature and the way that we consider ourselves on our day-to-day as a part of it, rather than it being something that we use or utilize for our own benefit. And then we consider as well the indigenous cosmology and how for decades and for generations, they've lived in harmony with nature. And in a lot of indigenous cosmology, nature is a part of them. So the concept of rights might not translate immediately to indigenous cosmology just because they've always done it that way. So we do think about how nature doesn't have, rights of nature doesn't have a one size fits all approach to it. And so that's why we explored the different approaches that we've seen, and definitely not all of them, but we talked about the constitutional approach at the national level, where we can see that in Ecuador, which is the first country in the world that considered the rights of nature in its constitution back in 2008. We also saw the indigenous approach with a case in New Zealand with the Maori, and how they consider this river, the Whanganui River, to have a voice. And we see this through the legal guardianship that they have and they have established with their government. And as I'm speaking, I do want to remind you, and I believe my teammates added that to the chat, is that while we were going through this session, we were also noting our reflections on a Miro board. And so you can go to the link and also see the reflections that came out of this presentation. We also went through the judicial approach, and that's the case, for example, of the Atrato River in Colombia, and how there is an emphasis on an injunction to harm an activity. However, we do have to consider that this happens mostly after the harm has been done. So that is something to consider with a judicial approach. We went also over the community organizing approach that highlights the first rights of nature case in 2006. And that is the Tamaqua Borough in Pennsylvania that considered rights of nature in reaction to sewage sludge being dumped in their community. And we also talked about where to get started. And we mentioned getting started by the way that we speak, as I mentioned previously, referring to nature as a nature, or Mother Earth as a being rather than an ecosystem service or a resource. Considering also that recognition is not a granting, that there's a very big step from recognition to granting rights to nature. And human rights come hand in hand with nature rights. And also, what does rights mean to nature? And that just means giving legal protection to something other than using it as a property or as an object. And we also talked about what the implementation looks like and how we have to change the philosophical foundation of laws. We have to change the way that we look at, for example, possible standards that we would establish in a law. But we have to change that at the bottom. We really need to change the way that we think in order to be able to apply the rights of nature properly in our communities. And so after this Rights of Nature 101 presentation, we went on to 3 presenters. We had Gabriela Eslava from Colombia, and Gabriela told us a little bit about how the Amazon case came to being and how this happened through having children rights and children from all over Colombia as plaintiffs in the case to make a case that they had the right to a healthy environment, and therefore the Colombian Amazon now has rights. We also had, we watched a TED Talk from Kelsey Leonard about water and how water is essential to life, and why, and all the reasons why water needs these rights. So, and we can send a link to the chat so that you watch that TED Talk later on, because it's truly inspiring. And it also involves some action items there that we will be considering for our workshop today. And then finally, we had Shrishti Bhakpai from India, and she told us about how implementation of rights looks in South Asia, and what they have considered not only within their cultures, but also within their courts to be feasible to recognize rights of nature. How does that look like? How do they define a river that has rights? So they've gone all the way to the bottom to define what a river is, what it means. And then finally, we had also Lauren Tarr, our team member from the Garden Youth Hub as well, to talk to us about intersectionality. So what does this mean to talk about the rights of nature in other environmental movements? How does it mean to uphold rights of nature principles, and not only rights of nature, but at the same time, support other liberation movements within our own work that we're already doing. So how would it look like for you to include rights and nature principles and an earth-centered law or earth-centered ideas into the work that you're already doing? And yes, and then we had a great discussion. So now we are going to go into this workshop. But before that, I really want to introduce my team members here. We're going to have Michelle Bender. Michelle is the Ocean Campaigns Director at Earth Law Center. She's also part of the executive committee of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And she's one of the co-founders of the Youth Hub for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. We also have Lauren Tarr. Lauren Tarr is our governance facilitator for the Garn Youth Hub. And she's also a PhD candidate in environmental policy in the State University of New York. We additionally have Jack Omondi. Jack works for the Don Bosco Tech Africa, and he is a membership and outreach facilitator at the Garn Youth Hub. And me personally, I'm Rafael Iturralde. I am one of the co-founders of the Garn Youth Hub as well. And I work full-time at a clean water advocacy organization based here in New York called Waterkeeper Alliance. We also might and hopefully have our friend and co-presenter Shrishti Bhakpai joins. And she joins, I just want to give a quick intro of who she is. Shrishti is an activist researcher from India. She's a member from an environmental action group in India and has helped initiate Rights of Rivers in South Asia, the Rights of Rivers South Asia Alliance. And she spoke, as I mentioned previously, to us about how they have implemented rights of nature in South Asia. So if she does join us, we'll have some great insights from her as well.
Oh, I see her, she's here.
Oh, great. Awesome. So we can start. I'll give the floor to my teammates.
Hi, everyone. So as Rafaela introduced, I'm Michelle Bender, the Ocean Campaigns Director of Earth Law Center. Today, I am speaking to you on the homelands of the Coast Salish people in Seattle, Washington. What I'm going to do for this first part of the workshop is take us through what I call a line editing exercise. And it's really where you can apply what you've learned about what rights of nature is in practice. This was something that was really powerful for me to do when I was learning about earth law in law school. We were given this assignment to take a law or policy that we're familiar with and look at it differently. And what I mean by that is try to put on a different hat than how you normally look at language and law and policy, and try to really look at the words that are used and how the words together, the phrases, can impact how it's implemented. And so as we talked about, one of the main goals of rights of nature is to get us out of this ownership and dominion worldview. And a way we can do that is by not equating nature as a natural resource, its benefits as an ecosystem service, anything that sort of touches upon only nature being there for human benefit and utility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, but I'm also putting in the Google Doc if it's easier for you to load it on your computer and view it that way. And what I'm going to ask as we go through this exercise is to either feel free to raise your hand, to unmute yourself, to put in the chat when you would like or feel comfortable adding in. And so you'll see what I'm talking about. Just a second, I'll share my screen. All right, so everyone can see this okay? All right, so what I've done here is I've actually included, and depending on, how fast we go through this, we will start with some language from actually the IUCN statutes. And then if we have time, we can go more into some paragraphs I've grabbed from the Convention on Biological Diversity. I know that's a big interest for a lot of youth right now. And so what I want to do is let's just start with the first paragraph there, the first sentence. And what I want you to do is just take a look and reflect on the language. Take some time, think about what you would change if you were writing this from a rights in nature and even a rights of future generations standpoint. And I do want to know, I do have below the English text, I did put the Spanish, if that's helpful to all of you as well. So let's just go ahead and start with this first part of the preamble for the IUCN. Right now we have that they recognize that the conservation of nature and natural resources involves the preservation and management of the living world, the natural environment of humanity, and the Earth's renewable natural resources on which rests the foundation of human civilization. So I want to open it up if anyone has an initial thought on what they would change first, suggestions on what they would change it to, anything like that.
I'm thinking about, yes, exactly what Alisa mentioned in the chat. Alisa mentioned in the chat, natural resources implies domination over nature.
Yeah, so what I would do in this case is I would just delete that. So we have it deleted.
Great.
That's a great start. Any other suggestions for how you might change this first sentence? And feel free to unmute yourself or small enough that I don't feel like we need to raise a hand.
I think the use of the language on which rests the foundation of human civilization is really kind of saying that the underlying reason for conservation of nature is because humans need it.
Exactly.
I would probably just take the on which rests the foundation of human civilization out.
Then, yeah, right before that, it says natural resources. Well, maybe we can take that out too.
Yeah. So we could consider, and these are sort of just the exercises that I get people to start to do too, is we could delete it, but also I want you to think about how you would actually change it. So if we want to make it clear that we are dependent on the earth and its proper functioning, could we say that in a different way? Does anyone have suggestions for how to just tweak that language?
So Erin in the chat says remove management and leave preservation.
That is a great point. One of the ideas that I touch upon when we're going through these exercises is that you see a lot in law and policy that we say that we need to manage nature and the living world, but really we need to manage human activity, not the other way around.
I wonder if we could change the on which rests the foundation of human civilization to like which human civilization is fortunate to benefit from.
Great point. So one thing I'm catching, and this is just something little that we do in terms of very small edits, is what we've started to do is actually capitalize nature. And that allows us to think in very simple terms as a proper noun, right? A he, a she, just like we would capitalize our own names. I see Shristi has her hand up too.
Yeah, just one, I think additions are interesting and good. One thing that I wanted to add was that instead of just, as in saying conservation of nature, rather we could say rest of nature, because it's kind of like that whole idea that nature is separate from us and hence nature needs to be conserved, but rather humans and nature, there is actually no that sort of a binary that exists. And so it's the conservation of the rest of nature, and humans are very much part of nature.
Great point. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we could do even just with this first sentence, right? I did this, I actually submitted a similar idea and line edit of these preambles here. Another way we could change this is of course take out the second reference of natural resource too, and just say earth, you know, the earth as a whole, Mother Earth. And we can make it clear too that to all species, yeah, great point, that we're not the only ones that depend on a healthy environment, right? It's all species. I see another comment that just came in that some countries don't accept the term Mother Earth. This is a very valid point. You know, everyone has their own relationship with nature and how they define it. And there isn't one accepted way of acknowledging the natural world across all cultures. So you could put clarifiers in here, or actually, you know, add all the different, you know, ways of acknowledging Mother Earth, nature as well. So really just looking at this paragraph, one last thing that I would change is the natural environment of humanity. We could either consider deleting that altogether or changing it. Does anyone have suggestions on that? And don't be shy. If you're not an expert, that's the point of this exercise, is we want to make you feel comfortable actually feeling like you can apply this. You don't have to be a lawyer.
I would personally take out of humanity altogether, because it implies, you know, the ownership of the natural environment.
And Michelle, are we going line by line, or can someone give a recommendation for like the third paragraph?
I was thinking we would go paragraph by paragraph just to keep everyone on the same page. I know it could be exciting to jump ahead if you want to start thinking ahead, of course, but I think I'm going to stick to just typing in the changes and talking about it as we go. But I think that's a great segue to move along. So I'm just going to read our new statement, because I think it's really important to reflect upon, you know, what we just came up with within the last 5 minutes. So now we have it as a part of the preamble statement, and how we would reflect on this is that we recognize that the conservation of nature, of which humans are a part of, involves the preservation of the living world the natural environment, and nature, Mother Earth, on which human civilization and all species are fortunate enough to benefit from. Oops. Yeah, I would say it is interchangeable, human civilization and humanity. You do human species, any, even just humans. But already that is a great step into implementing a rights of nature and earth-centered approach. We're already starting to think about what phrases, what words that we're using are human-centered, anthropocentric, and might lead down the road to implementation that does not benefit the well-being of the entire Earth community. So this is a great start. So we're just going to move along then to the second paragraph that I've identified. I can read it out loud if it's helpful. I don't know if it was helpful last time, but civilization has achieved its present high standard by finding ever more effective means for developing and utilizing these resources. And that consequently soils, etc., are maintained intact, and characteristic landscapes are of vital importance for economic, social, educational, and cultural purposes. Remove the in natural environment, in nature, and Mother Earth. Oh, that's for the first one. Okay, yeah.
I have a question, sorry. Here.
Yeah, go ahead. Anytime you have questions, comments, feel free.
Yeah, exactly. With the word civilization, you mean industrial societies or you mean humankind? Because I feel like civilization sounds like a very colonialism language for me. So if you are targeting just industrialization or cities who are industrial thing, I don't know if you follow my idea, maybe change it that. I don't know. It will be my suggestion for the beginning of the second paragraph.
Yeah, so your suggestion is to change reference of civilization to humankind.
I mean, if the word civilization refers to all humankind, yes. But if civilization, because afterward you say like utilizing these resources and so on and so on. I don't know if the target is like referred to industrial society, which means like a part of the humankind, So
Yeah, that's a great point. I personally don't know what their intent is with civilization. I would assume they're trying to incorporate all of humanity. But you bring up a great point. So is there a word or a phrase that people feel more comfortable using instead of civilization?
I will suggest societies then, and then it's maybe more general because there are not all societies are industrialized. There are societies that maybe are more like small groups isolated, but still they are a society, right? So maybe.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. Any other thoughts for this second statement that we've grabbed from the preamble?
Will exploiting be a more proper term rather than utilizing? So the gravity and extent of how we use resources?
So your suggestion is to delete utilizing and replace with exploiting.
Yeah, I would delete resources and change it for nature / Mother Earth.
Yeah, exploiting nature. Yep. Any other thoughts for this second statement? Yeah, that's a great point. A right to nature example that we're seeing in Bolivia, they talk about well-being differently. That it's not just well-being in terms of economics, but also in your standard of living, your life, how you live with nature. So there's certainly, that statement does raise flags. It could be it's perceived present high standard or something like that. If anyone has other suggestions for how to clarify that, that it's kind of this flawed idea, please feel free. And as we're looking to maybe, one change that I see. Oh, okay. Thank you for tuning in, Roderick. Hopefully you can jump back in when you have better internet connection. Is that we're saying that the maintenance of intact ecosystems is important for our purposes, right? So we're highlighting economic, social, educational, and cultural purposes. So I personally, oh, Rain, I see you have a hand up.
Hello, I'm sorry. I think there's a disconnect between the first clause and the second clause, starting with and that consequently soils, water, forest. It for me personally, it's a disconnect wherein there's no coherence between these two clauses. It's more of a separate idea for each. So will it be possible to separate this into sentences instead?
Yeah, so your recommendation is to actually split that. Okay. So now we have, it has two different phrases or recognitions.
And then possibly remove consequently.
That?
I mean that
No, that, yeah.
yeah,
That.
that.
To me, I would delete that and start with a sentence with consequently, comma, soil, water, forest, and vegetation of life.
Yes, I agree. I'm sorry for the misspoke earlier.
Oh no,
Yes,
that's the whole point of this. We're
retain
learning from each
consequently.
other.
Yeah, consequently, comma. Yeah.
I also have a problem because it says that soils, waters, etc. are maintained intact. Well, we are obviously over exploiting nature, so there should be significant amount of degradation and cause of concern in this phrase, but it says that it's intact still.
So should we say should be maintained intact? Does that address your concerns, do you think? Different language?
That could possibly address, yes.
So I see a chat came in from Rodrigue. I don't know if he is still on to be able to expand or elaborate on the changes he thought, but he's noting that dynamics and context of where nature is located. These exist with humanity, and it's possible for others to exploit the other. Unless conservationists should now disregard the existence of humanity, rights approach should be balanced. So I'm not entirely sure where you are wanting to change certain language there. But if anyone has thoughts on that comment, feel free to jump in.
Maybe he means that where it says consequently soil, water, forests, and vegetation, etc., should be maintained intact. What does that? What do they mean by maintained intact? Does that mean the absence of humanity? Does that mean the preservation of nature as is without humans? That's sort of what I was also thinking, but I'm not sure what he's pointing to exactly. But I'm assuming that it's somewhere around that part. But like, as in, what do they mean by maintained intact? In terms of usage and or I don't know. Those are my thoughts based on what Roderick said.
That makes sense. So maybe I can just add an idea that some rights and nature laws put into their policies, and maybe see if we want to change any that to reflect that. When we define the rights in nature, a lot of times we're seeing that nature has a right to maintain its natural functions and cycles, so that it's allowed to continue its processes, to evolve, to thrive. And we see that in a lot of laws and policies regarding rights in nature. So I'm wondering, maybe that concept could be better inserted to clarify what the maintenance of an intact ecosystem might look like.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
We have a comment from Daniel. For me, high standard is subjective, so I'd rather use improved well-being. Oh, okay. I'll just add a clarifying note there. Yes, Tristy.
Yeah, I just have a point about that maintained intact bit. I wonder though that what you've just added would resolve at least what I had in mind when I read Roderick's comment, and in general about this whole maintaining intact ecosystem kind of an approach, which a lot of pro-conservation laws and policies have done in various parts of the world, where they have been used as means to displace the local communities, indigenous communities, from their own habitats, saying that this is an area, it's a protected area, it's and so then remove the local communities from there, and the state would administer this area and maintain it intact and maintain the nature cycle and functions. So I wonder if that would resolve, or um, I'm not sure if that would resolve um, what what I think. Also, the comment was made. I don't know. I did not gather the name, but also that comment sort of hinted at that point, where it's about the violation of human rights also.
Yeah, wow, that's a great point. So we can consider adding some clarifying language about harmonious living, local communities, indigenous consent, things like that might help sort of with that balancing that needs to happen in addition to the maintenance of ecosystems, right? Any thoughts on something that resonates more so with someone?
I like what you said about being able to live in harmony with nature. So rights of nature doesn't completely prevent someone from like cutting a tree for subsistence to build a house or a home or something that they need, but rather it's just this harmony, like find this balance that I think we're trying to get at.
I think we'd have to play around with it more, but we could look at, maintain in a harmonious way with humankind and local communities, something like that. We could play around with all that sort of language to further clarify this balancing that needs to happen for sure. I think I saw a few other hands, or did they go down? So what I touched upon earlier too is one thing I would add at the end of this is to clarify that this maintenance of harmonious living and allowing nature to continue its cycles and its functions is not just important for humans and our benefit. It's also important for the entire earth. All other living species, all other ecosystems are intertwined, they're dependent on one another. So any sort of language that we could add in or clarify that it's not just for humans is important when we're looking at, through a rights of nature earth law lens. So something I would do is, add in something like ecological or, ecosystem benefits at the end, in addition to these other purposes, right? So I think what we'll do is we'll just take time going through the last two for the IUCN preamble, but I've left up the CBD if you want to do that exercise on your own, if that sounds okay. We're having a great discussion and ideas relative to this. So I don't want to just rush through, but I do have, and it's not in order, just random statements taken from the Convention on Biological Diversity's preamble that you can do this exercise yourself after this workshop if you'd like, but we'll just continue with the IUCNs and do the final last two, and then we'll move to our next section of the workshop. So next we have that increasing impoverishment of natural resources will inevitably result in a lowering of human standards of living, but that this trend need not be irreversible, provided that people fully come to recognize their close dependence upon these resources and to the recognition of the need to preserve and manage them in a way that is conducive to peace, progress, and prosperity of humanity. So that one is a really bad anthropocentric statement. Not bad. I don't want to say that it's horrible, but I see a lot of glaring examples. We already have a suggestion coming in from Rain. Impoverishment replaced with overexploitation, natural resources replaced with nature. All right. So yeah, it seems weird to call, it is somewhat personifying nature by saying it's impoverished, but it's still a little weird, right? Overexploitation of nature. We also have a comment, need not be irreversible as a double negative. Correct. Result. So suggestions, that's just an odd statement, right? Trend can be reversed. Perhaps. Should be reversed.
I think we also had a hand up somewhere.
Feel free to just comment too. We have a small enough session that we can be very interactive. Must be reversed. Yes. One suggestion. Oh, Megan, yeah.
I was just gonna say again, there's a reference in like a lowering of human standards of living as opposed to just like a lowering of the standards of living for all beings.
Yep.
Or, and then that still, I guess, is all beings depending on nature, but at least it's less anthropocentric.
So obviously we could change this language, but something like in a lowering of the well-being of the whole earth, or sometimes we see it in our rights and nature statutes, like entire earth community, ideas like that. Oh no, Daniel can't hear us. Okay. So I really like that we can reverse this by saying that we recognize our close dependence upon nature. I don't like that it says resources, but that's an easy switch that we've been making throughout, right? Upon nature. Any other thoughts for this particular paragraph? Haley.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the language of managing these resources or managing nature. I think that we could change that because that just shows human domination of nature again.
Right. So one change we could look at making in that case would be we could clarify that we're preserving nature, but we're managing human activity rather than nature itself. We have a comment for Rain, must be reversed. Do they mind? Rain, do you mind just clarifying what your comment is on environmental preservation?
Hello. So after the phrase "but that this trend must be reversed through environmental preservation that promotes peace, progress, and prosperity on Earth," so that other words in the paragraph will no longer be redundant and will be more concise, if that would be more amenable.
Sorry, I'm trying to see where you're talking about.
So for all of the text that is highlighted in pink, I
Okay.
would suggest that all of those are removed and just replaced with "through environmental preservation that promotes peace, progress, and prosperity on Earth." Unless
Okay.
unless there is a way for us to also include human recognizing need to preserve nature and manage human activity. But the phrase I sent in the chat, I think, is more concise and also hits what the original target is, original message. I'm not sure. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's a great idea. We could consider splitting it. You know, you had that idea up top, that it's helpful to separate out the phrases so that they're more clear and more focused. So this could be And then we could say that people must fully come to realize their or recognize their close dependence on nature. And then delete that last part. So then it's focused on interconnection and responsibility of managing human activity versus just doing it in a way to preserve progress. That could work. Yeah.
Jack is raising their hand.
Jack, go ahead.
Yes. I wanted to take you to a previous statement of the increasing of exploitation. I was thinking that we could, instead of using exploitation, we could use maybe degradation. Because sometimes we don't, I don't know whether that works. I don't know. Yeah, that word. Because I was checking exploit is just to make something maybe poor, but when you degrade without respect. You don't have respect for such a thing. Like sometimes human beings exploit resources without having the respect to preserve.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Jack. So unless anyone has any lingering thoughts there, we can just move on to the last little sentence I've included from the preamble, and then we can go on to the next step, kind of reflect on this. So we have that the IUCN is convinced that since protection and conservation of nature and natural resources are of vital importance to all nations, a responsible international organization primarily concerned with the furthering of these aims will be of value to various governments, the UN, other agencies and organizations. So the last part might not need to touch much, but there's certainly some changes we can make in the first part of that paragraph, right? Yes, so we have Rain suggesting change all nations to all life on Earth. I like that. Thank you. Any other suggestions? Well, we have our normal one that we've been doing throughout all of the paragraphs, right? Which is to capitalize nature and delete reference of it as a natural resource. I don't know if I would, what other changes I would make, but I see those two that we've, as some key ones that we can make in this final paragraph. Does anyone have any other thoughts for this portion as well as other ones we had above? Oh, all right. Well, so I hope you feel comfortable being able to apply what you've learned about rights in nature. You know, I do want to really highlight that anyone can do this. You know, we all did this today and we have different backgrounds. And we can not only have this sort of, you know, lens or view in our conversations, but in our advocacy and in the issues that we care about. We can start to have these conversations or suggest changes within our own work, our organizations, the mission of the organization, anything like that, where something like we highlighted that really stands out to us. You know, Haley, I know you mentioned that human standards of living is just something that stands out to you glaringly. And so that's something you can mention to other organizations, or, you know, if you're involved in work and you hear that's a focus, you can bring that up and feel comfortable bringing it up. And so now, you know, I want to just see if anyone has any questions or comments about this sort of workshop exercise that we just did. And feel free, you know, to put it in the chat or raise your hand, unmute yourself before we move along to the next exercise.
I am curious, when you've submitted these recommendations to groups, what kind of feedback do you usually get?
Yeah, so I've actually been involved in a few exercises like this that are specific to the IUCN. In the 2016 Congress, I actually did the line edit of the action program. And I just looked and tried to find 2 places where I thought rights in nature could fit in the program because it wasn't mentioned. And what we did is we drafted the recommendation just like this as a line edit, you know, showing our recommendation and what we would add. And then we included clarifying statements about why it's necessary, you know, just a little bit of background. And then what my previous executive director at the time, Linda Sheehan, what she did was she gained support. So she went around and emailed the IUCN members, the voting members that she knew of, and the partners, and gained a whole list of support for that change in the action program. Now that's a little different. You know, the example we just used was the statutes. So obviously that's a longer haul. You know, that's basically the constitution of the organization, the constitution of a nation. So you can imagine the politics and the discussion that would need to happen to do this. But you can at least start to propose it to organizations and see what their thoughts are, and at least encourage discussion about it and see if anyone would be willing to submit it officially and vote upon it. You know, there's processes within the IUCN with motions and things like that that kind of occur that might be harder for an individual to be involved in, but you can always go to an organization that you know of that is a part of it.
Awesome, thank you.
I just want to say, I think this was a really helpful exercise, both to kind of take a look at it through a different lens, and then with your experience kind of benefit from how you change the language, because sometimes, you know, you can see something, but you're like, I'm not sure how to fix it. So it's really helpful to kind of get a bit more versed in the language. And I think some of my colleagues and I have been chatting. I think we're going to try and look at some of our own organizations' literature through this lens, just as a bit of a thought exercise. So thanks for leading us through it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And I do want to note that we're constantly changing it. Like, we are always learning. So even if I might think something a year ago, how I might write it or suggest and change now is different. And so it's a constant learning process, even for us who have been studying and learning about rights in nature. So don't feel like there's only one right way, right? All right, so I think we could go ahead and move along to the next exercise. So I will stop sharing my screen. Like I said, feel free to use that document, the CBD text that I included if you want to practice more and do more exercises like this. And I will hand it off to Lauren Tarr, who is one of our great facilitators with the Garn Youth Hub.
Thanks, and thank you for that, Michelle. That was great to go through. All right, so the next thing that we have that we're gonna hopefully get a lot of insight on from you all is, you saw that the IUCN, some of the language needs can be improved to include more rights of nature. And so we're working on a petition or a pledge that we're going to submit to them, and so that they can hopefully incorporate some of these ideas into their work. And so we've broken down the petition into a couple different parts. We have the introduction, why is rights of nature important? We have what is the IUCN already pledged to do for the IUC for rights of nature, or where could it? And then the next sections we say, as youth, after this summit, here are things that we personally are going to pledge to do to support rights of nature. And then what do we want the IUCN to do? So we're working on that, like personal pledges, like what are we, as we leave this summit, as we leave these workshops about rights of nature, how are we going to take these values into our own personal lives, into our organizations, into our schools? And so I'm just going to open it up to discussion. You're welcome to turn on your videos if we want to kind of see each other as we talk about this, or you can keep them off if you're more comfortable that way. And you can type your ideas into the chat box, or raise your hand, or discuss however is most comfortable for you. So the question is, how will I incorporate the rights of nature values, the rights of nature movement into my personal life and work?
So I'll just add that I added in the chat the Miro board that we gained insights from last session as well. So feel free to look at that to think of ideas, or just reiterate one that's on there that you support personally too. We'd love to hear if something on one of those sticky notes resonates with you. One I saw, just to kick it off, if helpful, came from Kelsey Leonard's Tech Talk that we listened to. And it was to pledge to ask ourselves, what have I done for nature today? What have I done for the water? I think that's something that I could commit to and could do more of.
Oh, I see EJ just asked to add the question in there. Could someone type the question into the chat for them? I see Rafa added, changing the way we speak about nature, Mother Earth. And that one, it takes a long time to get that into that practice. I know I'm regularly catching myself and correcting myself. And like all things, it's just the more you use it, the more comfortable you'll be using it. And it also changes with what language you speak. Like as a native English speaker, we're very conditioned to talk about nature with it, and this very inanimate, as if it's a dead object. It's something we don't use anymore. And switching that to something that's alive and is individualized, like it's her, that tree is a she or he or they, or a different pronoun altogether, but something that makes it seem alive instead of an object for us. And maybe that's different in your language. Your native language might already have some of this animacy inside of it. Let's see, another one is using participatory science resources to empower society and help scientists generate data. Nice, I like that. Participatory science is great. And so kind of lessens that hierarchy of who is allowed to make decisions about conservation, and helping everyone kind of, it promotes that more holistic view of things, and adding in that rights of nature element of, is nature part of this data collection? What is nature providing for us? And are we only looking at it from a human framework, or is it fully participatory of the ecosystem? And feel free to unmute yourself and say things out loud if you'd like. Rain brought up fight for systemic changes aside from focusing on individual action. Absolutely. Individual action is important, and it's all the little parts do add up, but if we're not changing the structures, we can only make it so far. And that was one of the things we started to touch on in our first section when we were talking about intersectionality or constellations of co-resistance. If we're fighting for rights of nature, we also have to help those people who are fighting for democracy or court systems that will uphold these rights that we're trying to put into place. So kind of looking at these systemic changes that will make all of us more liberated together. Someone added having rights of nature in courses of law, sciences, and everything that we study since our schools to post-graduation. I'm curious, you can do it as like a show of hands or write in the chat. How many of you have learned about rights of nature in your courses or have a course for it? Michelle, all right. A little bit from Rafa.
There's a brief mention in the Ecuadorian school curriculum about the idea of summa causa or good living, but very brief.
Yeah, I had it a little bit with Dr. Robin Walkimmer teaches at my school. And so she includes it in a lot of her lessons from like the Anishinaabe viewpoint. But then as soon as you leave that classroom and then you're in anything else, it's very much resource management kind of language. Okay, Haley mentioned an environmental law class that talked about it. My environmental law class did not. I'm curious what school you're at or what country that was in.
Yeah, so I was at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So the instructor who taught that class was an environmental lawyer, and he previously was in forestry, so he was quite an advocate for the rights of nature, which was really refreshing, and I learned a lot from him.
That's awesome. Could you type that university into the chat? I'm gonna look that up if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I'm gonna try and be pushing my own university to include this more. And if I can show like, hey, it's being done in other law classes, that helps bolster that for me. That's one of my own personal pledges, is to make this part of my school.
That's awesome, Lauren. I want to mention that, Earth Law Center, we just, in collaboration with, so many authors from around the world, finished writing and then published an Earth Law textbook. So this largely came about, as I mentioned, I took an Earth Law course, over 5 years ago now at Vermont Law School. And it was taught by Linda Sheehan. And we basically used like this course book of, articles, all that kind of stuff just put together. And, had the exercises, had the assignments, the questions that you would do within, all that kind of stuff. But we now just finally made Rights of Nature, Earth Law in a course book. It's catered towards law schools, I will say. But it's really inspiring to see that there's already been some interest internationally. We have universities here in the US, Vermont Law School being one, as well as in Latin America and Europe, starting to think about incorporating it into their courses. So as more information becomes available, we try to share on our Facebook and website with that.
That's awesome. It's good. It's encouraging.
If I may add on something.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Yes. So the course book that Michelle was talking about right now, I have been contributing to the one that's coming up next after the Earth Law Earth Law book that has already been published. I don't know. I think I have spoken to Michelle about it probably, or it was somebody else I was coordinating with. So I think that book is something that has finally given a concrete shape. I was telling this to Grant also and to Tony as well, that finally we have one concrete document where we have from each jurisdiction, we have it in place, which something when I went through the course in my post-graduation, in my master's in law, I did not know a lot of it. Because of course there have been subsequent developments. So everything has finally been compiled together. So I think that way, this book is something which will interest the law students also, because I am a law student and I just taught rights of nature in the as an elective paper in my law school. And the first challenge that I faced while I was preparing to teach them, because earlier I was taught the subject, now I had to teach, was the question or the balance between law vis-a-vis environmental philosophy, social sciences, and all of it. Because as a law student, at least back in India, the question is, I want to know the law. What is the law all about? So every time it's like, what is the law? So that we have this book, it gives that interest, or kind of codification in the form of a book, that here you can see what earth law is all about, here you can see what rights of nature can actually legally be a possibility. Because in countries like India, honestly, it is just those four decisions, that's it. There haven't been much development, and the Supreme Court also, as you all know, it has not been very uh, uh, receptive about this entire concept. So for that, to convince the younger generation, though even I'm also from the younger generation, but younger to me, I mean, to convince them of rights of nature, it is an exercise of convincing. So it's not that something which comes very quickly to them. So I think that has been interesting. And since Michelle brought it up, so I just wanted to say that I have also personally learned so much from the book, from the entire compilation that has happened. And yes, so I think the other day I was speaking to Rafaela, and I told her that rights of nature is a passion now, and it's just inseparable. So I think I owe a lot to my introspection of my existence as a human being to rights of nature. So going back to Stone and all of them, I think it's a lot of thing together which all of us can probably work together. And when I saw that having IUCN having specifically 2 different sessions on rights of nature, what else can you expect? So I think this is now it's happening because of the youth. As the question was, what can the youth do? I think it's because of the youth. It probably would not appeal to the ones with the gray hair, honestly, because I was taught this subject by someone who belongs to this younger generation, not someone who's an environmental law teacher per se. So I think that transition is what is the freshness and youthfulness of rights of nature. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. That's really inspiring. And I
Thank you
love
so much.
I love that this is an international conference, and it's so we can feel so siloed and isolated and lonely if we're the only person that knows about rights of nature in our town, in our school, but connecting with other people, even if it has to be international, it empowers us.
Yes, so true. So true.
All right, thank you. All right, Haley, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just was going to kind of comment on the subject of, talking about the rights of nature in university settings, which I think is really important and then like for law students. But I think it would also be really great if this could be something taught to, even younger people, like from grades like kindergarten to 12, even just maybe less of the law aspects, but more of just, the idea of nature having rights. I think that, introducing that idea and changing the language earlier on would be really important. And I know the question kind of stemmed from what can we do in our personal lives, and I'm not so involved in the education of youth or the development of curricula, but I just thought that that's something that it would be really great to see that being introduced at a younger age, because I think that that's when it's, younger people of that age group are really, can really kind of get that and get that at a younger age.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We had in our first session a 9-year-old who wanted to know how to get more involved, which was really inspiring and cool. But I wasn't sure what resources to send. So I don't know how many of these things exist yet at that level, but they definitely should. And I've been thinking about looking at children's books and how many of our children's books have animals in clothes hanging out with people, and it's like they're equals and they're friends, and we as little kids we intuitively see all these other species like us. We'll talk to the animal as if the animal understands us, but then at some age we're told to stop doing that. So I want to figure out how to, thinking about how to keep that idea of rights and equality between species alive is important. Oh, sorry, Juan, I was going too fast. I was getting excited. Okay. Let's see. So what are some other things that people would like to pledge that they'll do for rights of nature?
Lauren, can you tell us which ones we have so far so that we don't repeat what we've been saying?
Yes. Michelle, could you share your screen? Do you have that typed up? Awesome. So we have using participatory science resources to empower society and help scientists generate data. Lessen the hierarchy of who is allowed to make decisions around conservation. Fight for systemic changes aside from focusing on individual actions. Having rights of nature courses, rights of nature in courses of law, science, and everything that we study. Push it to be taught in our schools, balancing between law, philosophy, and social sciences. Find the intersection with rights of nature and discipline, teaching it to younger people, and changing the language earlier on.
I think if we can add a little bit for find intersection with rights of nature in my work and discipline, I would like us to look within to our own organizations. And as we speak, I mean, I know I'm extremely involved in rights of nature, but I think about my day-to-day full-time job and how so much language can be changed. So go back to our own organizations, spaces, and talk about it, create that space. I think that's a commitment that we can also make.
Okay, so we can keep thinking about that, and that will still be open. But an additional question we're going to add into this. So our petition that we're submitting, oh, we just have one here. Would you be able to translate that into English? Cool. Thank you both. Thank you. TikTok to reach children. Yeah, social media. Wonderful. And simple language, digestible and simple. Yeah, one of the things that Garn Youth Hub has been doing the last few months is a book club. And we've kind of, our first book was the Christopher Stone, which parts of it were easy to read, parts of it were tougher. And then the next one was a more kind of public, meant for a public audience, general audience, and that was easier to read. And so on our website, we're going to try to start noting which books for which audiences. And if you're a very beginner to rights of nature, this is a good book to start with versus your law textbook that gets you into the details. So understanding the language levels. Okay, so then the next discussion question, and feel free to keep adding to this first one, but the next one is, what do we want the IUCN to do? Yep, so Michelle put it in the chat. How can IUCN put their rights of nature commitments into action? What would implementation look like? And how can they similarly honor the rights of future generations? And again, this is also in the mural board if you wanted to look there for some ideas, or if there's any new ideas that you would like to add, now's a great time to add those, and we'll include it in the petition.
Maybe I could just add a thought, because I talked to another member of the World Commission on Environmental Law within the IUCN, and actually learned that before this conference was going to be virtual, that when it was going to be held in person, there was going to be a registration fee. And I think it was supposed to be something like $300. So I think, and this doesn't even just apply to just the IUCN, but all sort of conferences and events that we might be interested in, the United Nations Oceans Conference, the World Ocean Summit, all those kind of great COP gatherings, to make them more inclusive and make it so those that really do have an interest and want to make a difference can attend, and that costs. I know to some extent you can't, let everyone be able to participate, but to make it so it is more inclusive, so that we're not leaving out diverse, marginalized communities, youth that really want to be involved and who are going to need to know about this stuff, because we're going to be inheriting all the issues, and we're trying to make a difference. So that would be, one recommendation I have is to ensure, to the best that we can, to be as inclusive as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I know, was this conference going to be in Europe, or where would if it were in person, where it would be?
I think it was going to be in line with the World Conservation Congress, so in Marseille, in France.
Yeah, I know I would not have been able to attend, and I imagine most youth wouldn't be able to afford international travel to attend. Looks like someone asked in the chat, how can African countries be committed to this? Do we have, Jack, would you like to add some thoughts on this one?
Hello.
Yeah. Or EJ, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to add something about your second question.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, we all know that IUCN is working a lot for conservation and management of nature. So I just want to add something that IUCN have to do when they are going to implementation on a project. Then after that, IUCN also need to engage youth and other stakeholders for monitoring of that project and evaluate the success of their project, how much they are going to success and up to how extent they will be success. So IUCN have to create a team. That team can monitor the project for a long period. So that's one point. Secondly, IUCN need to properly check and balance on the intergovernment, central government, that central government are going to involve the youth, the local stakeholder communities for the conservation or management of any flora and fauna of the specific area or a biodiversity hotspot area. That central government, where they are going to funding, they are actually in reality or in ground state, they are engaging youth, They are engaging, empowering the community, and up to how extent they are monitoring the project. And other thing I want to share that IUCN have to uh, create such type of platform where different type of people, different type of youth from globally, they can share their experience, their knowledge, their scientific knowledge, their finding, their solution about different projects. So by this way, if IUCN or other organization give chances like that, the youth of world can know about ideas of each other, and they can tackle the problems easily and find out the reason of like climate change and some other decline of species and such that project which are ongoing. So point is that IUCN or other organization need to involve and exchange the ideas of young youth globally. Other thing, IUCN need to ensure that in such that I am from Pakistan, which is not developed country, is going to developing. So a lot of biodiversity, flora, fauna, such as diverse ecosystem from almost zero to 20,000 altitudinal variation. You can find different type of forest, different type of, even we have snow leopard geographic range, home range in northern part of Pakistan, especially Gilgit, which geographically from China, Nepal, Pakistan, and India are collaboratively conserving snow leopard. So such type of activities, many different species like Indus river dolphin is the indigenous species of Pakistan, which is uh, endangered, critically endangered status. The IUCN red list status is critically endangered species. So there is somehow we are lacking the scientific knowledge, collaboration with different countries. So we need to create such type of platforms where different type of people sit and give solutions, some ideas, and some scientific knowledge. Even they need to, because these are our common issues, climate change. If there is habitat loss or extent of species, the impact is globally. So I think this type of things, it's very important. The collaboration is very important. This is my first chance I get the opportunity to sit in this summit and just to speak my ideas, my thoughts, and I am just trying to learn a lot by the panels, the participants. So it's very amazing, and I think for in future IUCN and other GF and WWF, other organization will give more chances like that to share ideas. By this way, we can conserve our nature, because if there is nature conserved, we will survive better. Unsustainable use of anything is bad, because somehow local communities in Pakistan and some other developing countries do not know and aware about the consequences of unsustainable use of any natural resources. So it's very important to aware the local communities in any part of area in the world, any youth from school level, colleges level, and where he need of time to try to speak for in communities, that it's very important to conserve the nature, because its implication is very hard. I want to quote an example that here in northern part of Pakistan, the deforestation rate is very high. So before last year, the flood was came in, and nowadays even annually floods are going on. Why? Deforestation and other type of activities. Otherwise, after 10 year or 15 years, somehow rivers floods are come. But now, due to climate change, it's annually going to flood down regularly. So agriculture land, infrastructure, and other things are just structural damages. So we need to work collaboratively, work together, and we need to understand and we need to find out the reasons, the problems, where we are lacking, and why the things are happening globally wrongs. we have to find out such points, such reasons, and need to work. This is the time to work together for sustainably live in this nature. And if the nature is present, we are present. We right, well, in your first question, I just want to speak, but due to my internet connection I can't able to speak. Right of nature is very important to aware the people from school level, because in Pakistan, when I when I go to university, I was just trying to get admission in university. In my first semester, I just read it. I just hear this word right of nature. Before that, I was not aware about it. What is the right of nature, or what is the nature? After that, I realized that, and my observation found that if there is nature, we can survive. So my suggestion is that from school level, from beginning, and from administrative sector, from everywhere, we need to try to add a curriculum which is emphasized, which is enforced, that from young level the students know about nature and importance of nature, and otherwise what are the consequences for incoming generation. So thank you so much for giving me time, and I just said few words. So thank you again for all the participants, and thank you for sharing your ideas and knowledge. Because when we get ideas from developed worlds, developed countries, we learn from it, and then we try to implement these ideas and their solution in reality inside our communities. So it's very great for us to learn from such a wonderful panel. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And you brought up so many good points. Thinking about learning about this from early ages, definitely. And I loved how you mentioned engaging youth in the implementation and the monitoring of some of these proposals, not just getting our ideas, but helping us see the process through. I think that was a great thing to bring up. So thank you for sharing. And I added in the chat the shared Google document. So Michelle is taking notes as we listen, and you're welcome to follow along. If there's anything else you wanted added to your comments, let us know. There's a question in the chat. Where can I find the criteria for an ocean ecosystem to qualify for ecosystems rights? I'm thinking of a particular ecosystem on the high seas. Well, we have an ocean rights of nature expert right here.
Yeah, I just commented back. Yeah, so for some background is I've been looking at creating the frameworks for how to adopt a rights of nature approach to ocean law and policy. And I wouldn't necessarily say that an ecosystem needs to qualify to have rights. You know, with the rights of nature movement, we believe that all nature, Mother Earth, all ecosystems have inherent rights just for being. But I will say that there are certain criteria that we're working on developing within the field to know how to implement those rights and what those rights are. Thomas Berry talks about how every species and ecosystem has unique rights and what those might be. So Earth Law Center has developed a universal declaration of river rights. So a river has a right to flow unobstructed from dams, for example. Oceans, on the other hand, would have different inherent rights because just, you know, it's a different ecosystem. They require, it has, correcting myself, she has different needs. See, I even have to do it, correct our language from talking about nature as an it and a he, she. So I can certainly put the link to more information within the chat box, but feel free to reach out to, I can put my email as well for the more specifics of, you know, for anyone having the question of how do I implement this in my community. Earth Law Center, we're not the only one with toolkits and draft templates as well. So I'm just putting an example. that I'll put in the chat.
Great, thank you. So I have about 40 minutes left. I want to draw our attention to something that the IUCN, 20 minutes left. Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. We're 40 minutes into the hour. We have 20 minutes left. Thank you. The IUCN is, I think, pretty much daily having sessions of youth speak where we can give our suggestions. And there is also a form. So I will put that in the chat. But it gives you an opportunity to give these suggestions directly to the IUCN as well. Let me find that. This Youth Speak Forms document. So again, this is from the Youth Summit. And in this form, it has several different themes and asks you to choose one theme. So there's, I'll share my screen actually. So if you can see that, the themes are redressing environmental racism, green jobs, responses to the climate emergency, all these different themes, and you choose one in the form, and then you discuss why it matters, calls for actions. If you know of initiatives already working for this with youth, you can spotlight those, and any resources that you have that you want to share out. So again, this is the form, Youth Speak Forms, and we encourage you as you think about ways to improve or to give suggestions to the IUCN or how they can incorporate rights of nature into these different themes. That is a great direct way to give that information. And they also have Zoom calls for this where you can discuss it in breakout rooms and speak about it in conversation with one another. There's another comment in the chat. If it is possible to have competition like the Model UN, is that MUN, for the younger students in school and universities on rights of nature, and if IUCN can maybe start that with universities or organizations, this way young students will get to know of RON and the movements. International Rights of Nature Tribunals for Youth, that would be pretty cool. Do you want to talk about that a little, Rafa, what those international tribunals are about? I know there's not a youth version yet, but it's a thought for sure.
Yeah, and Michelle, you can add a little bit onto the tribunals and what the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature has done, but these are tribunals that are held normally and have been held parallel to the Conference of Parties, and they bring people from all over the world that come to testify towards the violation of the rights of nature in their communities. And not only the violation to the rights of nature, but also the violation of human rights. These tribunals are definitely, they're in many ways hypothetical, but what has come out of these tribunals do go and do get considered by courts and judges where there are rights of nature clauses in specific countries, like for example, Bolivia or Brazil. They have seen the effect of these tribunals. So I strongly encourage you to look into these tribunals, look at the previous cases that have been presented at the tribunals, but also right now we're having a series of tribunals led by the European Hub. So as we have a youth hub, there's also other hubs within the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. Some are regional specific, some are thematic specific. And so right now the European Hub is leading a series of tribunals for certain ecosystems. And so, yeah, you can tune into those, and we can definitely in the Youth Hub look into the possibility of carrying a youth international rights of nature tribunal in the future for sure. That's a great idea.
Nice. And I'm going to drop, I'm sorry we're sending so many links to you, but I'm going to put in the chat ways you can get in touch with the GARN Youth Hub. So GARN, again, is the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, and that's where me and Jack and Rafa and Michelle are all a part of. And it's international, it's free. It's a way that we meet monthly to discuss rights of nature issues. And we're going to form working groups and just keep collaborating and building. So here are some links where you can sign up on the contact sheet if you'd like. You can follow us on Instagram or Facebook, join the Facebook group, and we'll post different events as they come up. And it is member driven. So as people come up with ideas like mock trials or such, we can make that happen. So I think I'll just open it up to general comments and questions at this point, unless there's anything else, Rafa or Michelle or Jack, that I've missed that we want to make sure we touch on.
I just want to touch upon an idea that it's on the Miro board, and it's something that I am personally very interested in trying to get the IUCN to do. You know, we know that they have members, counselors, working groups, commissions, and I would love to see an effort to incorporate youth within all of that. So whether it's like a youth working group in every commission, and they can all connect with each other and collaborate on these cross-cutting issues. Like there's the World Commission on Environmental Law, there's also the World Commission on Protected Areas. So it could really be, you know, whatever issue you're more interested in or involved in, but then you're still connecting with the other youth. I think that's a gap that really needs to be filled. And also it'd be great if there is some way to, and maybe it's through the youth voice, but to ensure representation of Mother Earth and nature herself, and as, you know, a member or a stakeholder that can actually make decisions as well, because all these decisions are supposed to be for conserving nature. So why not have nature herself have a voice in these decisions?
Nice, I like that.
Yeah, I think that would be my number one ask. And if people are interested in trying to submit their ideas officially through those forums, you know, feel free to use any of the ideas we've suggested today. And hopefully, you know, we get rights of nature and rights of future generations included in the outcome document that the summit will produce for the IUCN Congress.
Oh, I do want to circle back. Someone had asked a question in the chat about African countries getting involved with rights of nature. We could circle back to that one. Sorry, I forgot it in the shuffle.
Yeah, let me respond about that African. I think in Africa, this is a very a new idea. Of course, it has been there for some time, but it's very new, especially to the young people, the rights of nature. Because most African countries, we learn more about environmental protection, climate change, but they don't, there is, like me, I am a environmental science student, but there's no way we studied or even had an idea of rights of nature. So this is something that African countries, especially in the education sector, need to incorporate slowly into the education system so that we get to know what rights of nature is. Like, for example, here in Kenya, if you would tell somebody what's the rights of nature, I think they have little knowledge about it. For example, even me, I knew rights of nature very, very late, especially after my degree. So there's something that African countries need to do, and the young people need to take a proactive role in fighting for or in recognizing rights of nature. I think we should do that more we should give more consideration to the rights of nature in Africa. Yep.
Thank you. And Rafa, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to Jack, going back to the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, we are in the process of creating an Africa hub that will be able to host folks from Africa that want to get involved in rights of nature issues. Also, one of the executive committee members of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, Cormac Cullinan, has also written about rights of nature in his book Wild Law and in other pieces as well. And so you can definitely look into him, into his work, as well as Nemo Bassi from Nigeria. He's also very active in Garn. So definitely the movement is starting in Africa, but you will see, and we will see more work being done there. And I'm sure Jack will help us and keep us posted on that as well.
Great, thanks. Could you type Cormac's name and the title of the book in the chat? Thanks.
Thank you, Juan. Multitasking.
Any other takeaways or thoughts that you want to share with the group, or questions you want to raise while we're all still here?
Maybe I can just add that I just added a Google form again in the chat for anyone that wants to share their email to keep in touch on this, whether it's just talking more, wanting to be a part of the Youth Hub, or just seeing the outcome document declaration that we'll be submitting on youth and rights in nature that came from this session. You know, that came in large part with, or it's being developed with the ideas that you all have given us from the first session and the second session. So we want you to also feel like you can share it, you can take ownership, you can use these ideas, you know, submit this to your local organization or government, you know, whatever form you think it would be helpful, to please feel free to take ownership for it as well, because your ideas are helping to shape this.
Absolutely, thanks. Michael, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Yeah, this is Michael from Nigeria. Yeah, and I'm actually just getting into this conference, maybe in and out because I've been busy with work and some other things at home. But I've actually seen beautiful ideas. I've seen beautiful plans and all the like that you guys have been actually sharing in different meetings and all the likes. But my own eye point is, what are the strategy that are being used to execute all this plan, to actually get the governmental organizations to give room to the youth, especially in Africa, for their voice to be heard and for them to actually take over some affairs where, you know, it calls for 21st century realities and implementations. So I just want to know some workable, some strategies that is being done to make this execution a very great one. Thank you.
Thank you. Rafa or Michelle, would either of you like to take that question?
And maybe I can start. You know, one strategy is certainly this conference, right? We are hoping that the suggestions that come out of this, that the IUCN and other institutional bodies and governments take heed of and implement. And that, you know, one of the main recommendations is making a space for youth in these high level decision-making processes. And that doesn't necessarily need to cause a lot of work, I would say. You know, I wouldn't think on the behalf of IUCN or other bodies that you might go to, but if you're thinking of how to help support that, you know, I would say starting to just request that space. I don't know what sort of processes you might have in Nigeria, but you know, in the US, we're allowed to write comment letters to our elected officials. We're allowed to email them. We're allowed to call them even. All that's made available. So that's something you can start to think about is, you know, just call them up to have the conversation and say, hey, I think you need, or let's talk about making space for youth in this event or in this, you know, council, organization, anything like that. And I'll stop there and see if anyone else has something to add.
Yeah, that's great. And there's strength in numbers too. Like if there are other youth organizations in your community or groups you can connect with, making that power within yourselves, and then the people who currently hold power will recognize that amongst you. Like if you have more voice in numbers, that can kind of help you get a seat at the table better.
Yeah, I get what has been said, but you know, when we are talking about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, one thing that comes to mind is, you know, how can we actually just go through a very difficult terrain? I think what is actually happening in Africa is deeper than what is being seen, because I can't write my governor, nobody will read it. Nobody wants to hear your voice. Nobody wants you to do, as in, the only way your voice can be heard in this part of the world is if you actually join the political class. And then when you join the political class to want to clamor for a change, the people will actually keep you quiet because it's a very dangerous terrain, especially in Africa. So there's a need to, you know, the older generation felt the youth want to take over from them or snatch the power. But that is not the idea. We understand, we can see things, we actually relate more with the root cause of things. We know our environment, we know what the problems are, and we know the solutions to it. But most of them are still thinking, you know, way back as 1960, 1975, and they have a kind of a traditional way of ruling. But we are thinking of inclusion, belonging, and inclusive governance. But the voice is not heard. And I think more has to be done and focus on Africa on how to let the older generation know that, okay, you have 70% of your population to be youth. You need to allow them drive the course of the economy of the country and of the governance of that nation. The only thing you need to give to them is guidance and governance and educate them. So in as much as the youth are coming together, are trying to make things happen, the older generation needs to be taught that, yeah, they are aging and there must be a passage of power from one generation to another generation. There must be that generational shift without any conflict. So that is my own take. That is what I see that is actually lagging behind, and it's huge here. It might be very easy in the Western world whereby you can write your governors, you can write your president, and people hear you. It's not the same here. It's a very difficult and a very different terrain, and that has to be put into consideration in actually getting workable principles and strategies to solve this problem, especially for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and letting us know that we definitely come from a certain point of view as we give advice from the American context. So it is good to be aware of the different contexts where we are. Thank you. So we are at the hour, so we're wrapping up. I see there's a more little bit more discussion in the chat. And we thank you all for being here, and thank you for your great discussion and contributions. And we hope you can follow us on our platforms and share your contact in our contact lists. I don't know if Rafa or Michelle had any other closing thoughts, but I think it's time to go.
I just wanted to second what you said. Thank you all for being here. And I just want to thank you again, the organizers who gave us the space to be able to have these sessions and workshops with you all. And also, of course, thank you for Juan for your hard work. I'm sorry if we spoke too fast. We get excited talking about what we're passionate about. So thank you so much, Juan. So yeah, let's keep in touch. You know where to find us, and reach out if you need anything.
Yeah, don't forget, put your email in the Google form if you want to keep in touch on this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.